Wow, you guys are quick. Thank you. Holy cow. Quick with the gifts. I appreciate it. Well, welcome in, those of you that are arriving. I appreciate you showing up early. Good evening. How are you? So I think we have a fun evening tonight. Kind of stepping away from our usual fare. Hello. Let me know if my voice is crackly tonight. I had a little bit of trouble with my audio setup earlier. Hey everybody, how we doing? Hello Wanda. Hello Eric. Hello Crazy Mama. Hello Songbird. How are you? Hello Wings That Work. Hello Strawberry. I appreciate you guys coming in. It's been a bit of a wild week since Sunday, and the whole reaching 10,000 followers. That was a crazy moment. And for those of you that are just joining us that weren't here on Sunday, yours truly cried live on the internet. It was good though. It wasn't like like the old full on full body sobbing snot bubble crying, but it was definitely emotional. It was emotional. It was kind of funny because I I had to laugh a little bit because as I was like kind of recounting it in my head, I haven't gone back and watched the video yet though. But I was like, it's what's funny is it's like I'm reading along and I'm reading along and I see chat just going crazy. Hey Irene. And I look over and I'm seeing is exciting, all the excited emojis and the congratulations, and then I just happen to look over at the goal counter, and I see that it was like at 10,006. Hey, reader, um, I'll bring this up again later, but for those of you that don't know, go follow Reader. She is doing really cool on her channel. She's reading The Wizard of Oz, and it's got a really cool nostalgia feel to it, and the way she's formatting and actually reading the book and turning the pages, and I really like what you're doing, Rita. So please keep doing that, and for those of you that are here, go give her a follow. Hey, Nerd Unleashed. How are you this evening? Thank you. 10,000 followers is just crazy. And I didn't even have to I didn't even have to like get up and like shake my butt on the internet to get 10,000 followers. So I appreciate that. It's so much. It's really cool. I was just the crazy part was is like going through. Hey. Well, no, this isn't Sunday, so we don't have to be family friendly. So I suppose I could, but nobody wants to see that. Not even me. What's funny though, the little things that they like turn on at 10K. Like I can make playlists now, which is like you think that that's just like goofy, but it's so. I'm not saying it was an option on Sunday. I think I would have lost most of my audience. Thank you, Wanda. I appreciate that. Um, maybe someday we'll, if you guys get me to 20,000, and it's not on a Sunday, then I might get up and shake my butt. But that's if when I start shaking, I kind of build up inertia, and I might like knock something over. So. But no, I really appreciate you guys that you were here and you were so excited. And when you guys were saying we did it, that is absolutely 100% the truth. I could not do this without all of you, and I would not want to do this without all of you. You guys make this worthwhile. Um, it's just awesome. So, yes, goals, yes. But what's one of the things I thought was interesting is I found like, oh, I'm like, they say, oh, you can apply for the creator rewards program. And then I go and I look at the qualifications and I'm going, okay, so you got to be over 18, you got to have 10,000 followers, and you got to have 100,000 views in the last 30 days. And I'm going, I'm not even close. But that's okay. That is okay. So just give it 2 minutes and we'll start reading. I think tonight is going to be fun. Happy person. It's a combination of things. I get suggestions from people, but I also kind of sit down and look at the books that I've read over this span of my 50 odd years on this planet, and I kind of pick them based on that too. So. Oh, see now, Rita, that's a challenge I'm willing to accept. Because you know what? If you had said to me a year ago that I would be sitting on 10,000 followers right now, I I definitely can get there. I can do that. I can do that. I haven't even picked my stories for Friday yet, so I might, I might be able to sneak that in there. You never know. We shall see. I will write that one down. Actually, DM that to me so I don't forget. If I can get to 100,000 followers, I will definitely shake my butt. But views, yeah, no, yeah, I don't know. I've built this without the views, and I'm okay with that. It's not, the lives are what's important to me. I would like to post a little more, but I've got. You are a little too eager to see me shaking things, lady. Since like last July, I was sitting on 2,300 followers, and now I'm at 10,000. At this pace, who knows where I could be at the end of the year, or by June, for that matter. I could be at 20,000 by June if this, seems to keep growing exponentially. It's very cool. But so I've got two stories for tonight. And I think one of the things I want to do is start to format Wednesdays and Fridays like old time movie theater programming. We've got a short at the beginning. And Mudshark Squared, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Um, do like a short at the beginning and then our feature presentation. And that's kind of what I've done tonight. So let's see how this works. All right, so it is 9:11 p.m. here on the East Coast. And we'll take the music down a notch here. So, we're going to get started. So, good evening, everybody. and welcome to another Storytime with UndeadPapa. And this is Wednesday Night Wonders. Tonight, we have something special. Two classic stories, each with their own way of pulling you in, one that plays with your imagination, and one that demands the truth. Now, we'll begin with The Open Window by H. Munro, who is also known as Saki, S-A-K-I. I don't know the reason why he went by that. I don't know if he was fond of the Japanese drink or what, but it doesn't matter. The story is equally good. The story is about a simple visit, a quiet conversation, and a story that may not be quite what it seems. And then, for the first time here on Storytime with UndeadPapa, we step into the world of Sherlock Holmes for a mystery wrapped in fear, where every detail matters, and the truth is hiding in plain sight. It's The Adventure of the Speckled Band by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And I know that quite a few of you have expressed that you're looking forward to that story. And I think tonight is going to be a fun night, so stick with me. So wherever you're listening from, dim the lights, sit back, and relax, because story time is about to begin. So let's begin with The Open Window. Wigs at work, I remembered this time, so make note of that. I always forget to change the visuals. My aunt will be down presently, Mr. Nuttall, said a very self-possessed young lady of 15. In the meantime, you must try and put up with me. Frampton Nuttall endeavored to say the correct something which would duly flatter the niece of the moment without unduly discounting the aunt that was to come. Privately, he doubted more than ever whether these formal visits on a succession of total strangers would do much towards helping the nerve cure which he was supposed to be undergoing. I know how it will be, his sister had said when he was preparing to migrate to this rural retreat. You will bury yourself down there and not speak to a living soul, and your nerves will be worse than ever from moping. I shall just give you letters of introduction to all the people I know there. Some of them, as far as I can remember, were quite nice. Frampton wondered whether Mrs. Sappleton, the lady to whom he was presenting one of the letters of introduction, came into the nice division. Do you know many of the people around here? Asked the niece, when she judged that they had sufficient silent communion. Hardly a soul, said Frampton. My sister was staying here at the rectory, you know, some 4 years ago, and she gave me letters of introduction to some of the people here. He made the last statement in a tone of distinct regret. Then you know practically nothing about my aunt, pursued the self-possessed young lady. Only her name and address, admitted the caller. He was wondering whether Mrs. Sappleton was in the married or widowed state. An undefinable something about the room seemed to suggest masculine habitation. Her great tragedy happened just 3 years ago, said the child. That would be since your sister's time. Her tragedy? Asked Frampton. Somehow in this restful country spot, tragedies seemed out of place. You may wonder why we keep that window open on an October afternoon, said the niece, indicating a large French window that opened onto a lawn. It is quite warm for the time of year, said Frampton, but has that window got anything to do with the tragedy? Out through that window 3 years ago to a day, her husband and her 2 young brothers went off for their day's shooting. They never came back. In crossing the moor to their favorite snipe-shooting ground, they were all three engulfed in a treacherous piece of bog. It had been that dreadful wet summer, you know. And places that were safe in other years gave way suddenly without warning. Their bodies were never recovered. That was the dreadful part of it. Here the child's voice lost its self-possessed note and became falteringly human. Poor aunt always thinks that they will come back some day. They and the little brown spaniel that was lost with them, and walk in at that window just as they used to. That is why the window is kept open every evening till it is quite dusk. Poor dear aunt. She has often told me how they went out, her husband with his white waterproof coat over his arm, and Ronnie, her youngest brother, singing "Bertie, why do you bound?" as he always did to tease her, because she said it got on her nerves. Do you know, sometimes on still, quiet evenings like this, I almost get a creepy feeling that they will all walk through that window. She broke off with a little shudder. It was a relief to Frampton when the aunt bustled into the room with a whirl of apologies for being late in making her appearance. "I hope Vera has been amusing you," she said. "She has been very interesting," said Frampton. "I hope you don't mind the open window," said Mrs. Sappleton briskly. "My husband and brothers will be home directly from shooting, and they always come in this way. They've been out for snipe in the marshes today, so they'll make a fine mess over my poor carpets. So like you menfolk, isn't it?" She rattled on cheerfully about the shooting and the scarcity of birds and the prospects for duck in the winter. To Frampton it was all purely horrible. He made a desperate but only partially successful effort to turn the talk on to a less ghastly topic. He was conscious that his hostess was giving him only a fragment of her attention, and her eyes were constantly straying past him to the open window and the lawn beyond. It was certainly an unfortunate coincidence that he should have paid his visit on this tragic anniversary. "The doctors agree in ordering me complete rest and absence of mental excitement and avoidance of anything in the nature of violent physical exercise," announced Frampton, who labored under the tolerably widespread delusion that total strangers and chance acquaintances are hungry for the least detail of one's ailments and infirmities, their cause and cure. "On the matter of diet they are not so much in agreement," he continued. "No," said Mrs. Sappleton in a voice which only replaced a yawn at the last moment. Then she suddenly brightened into alert attention, but not to what Frampton was saying. "Here they are at last," she cried, "just in time for tea. And don't they look as if they were muddy up to the eyes?" Frampton shivered slightly and turned towards the niece with a look intended to convey sympathetic comprehension. The child was staring out through the open window with dazed horror in her eyes. In a chill shock of nameless fear, Frampton swung around in his seat and looked in the same direction. In the deepening twilight, 3 figures were walking across the lawn toward the window. They all carried guns under their arms, and one of them was additionally burdened with a white coat hung over his shoulders. A tired brown spaniel kept close at their heels. Noiselessly they neared the house, and then a hoarse young voice chanted out of the dusk, "I said, Bertie, why do you bound?" Frampton grabbed wildly at his stick and hat. The hall door, the gravel drive, and the front gate were dimly noted stages in his headlong retreat. A cyclist coming along the road had to run into the hedge to avoid an imminent collision. "Oh, here we are, my dear," said the bearer of the white mackintosh, coming in through the window. "Fairly muddy, but most of it is dry. Who was that who bolted out as we came up? A most extraordinary man, a Mr. Nuttall, said Mrs. Sappleton. Could only talk about his illnesses, and dashed off without a word of good-bye or apology when you arrived. One would think he'd seen a ghost. I expect it was the spaniel, said the niece calmly. He told me he had a horror of dogs. He was once hunted in a cemetery somewhere on the banks of the Ganges by a pack of pariah dogs, and had to spend the night in a newly dug grave with the creatures snarling and grinning and foaming just above him, enough to make anyone lose their nerve. Did we just freeze? Uh-oh. Wonder what happened. Man, I hope I'm not having technical difficulties again. Where did I leave off? I'm not showing any frame drops. That's weird. Check OBS. Nope, everything's good there. Strange. Very strange. Well, I will back up a paragraph or two. I expect it was the spaniel, said the niece calmly. He told me he had a horror of dogs. He was once hunted into a cemetery somewhere on the banks of the Ganges by a pack of pariah dogs and had to spend the night in a newly dug grave with the creatures snarling and grinning and foaming just above him, enough to make anyone lose their nerve. Romance at short notice was her specialty. Oh, damn kids. Oh, that was a good story. I like that one. Have I stabilized it all, or are we still cutting in and out? No, nothing is going to stop the stories. Hey, we had that one night where my computer rebooted twice, so hopefully we won't go that for there. All right, good. Good. Did we get the end of the story? Are we good there? Hey, Katie, how are you? Hey, Sonia. Oh, boy. All right, so that's enough for... that is enough for that. All right, so that was The Open Window by H.H. Munro, otherwise known by Saki. A reminder that sometimes the most convincing stories are the ones we want to believe. So now we turn from imagination. Did she? Or were the men ghosts? We don't know. My guess is she was messing with him. So now we turn from imagination to something more grounded. A mystery which can only be solved by the one and only Sherlock Holmes. This is The Adventure of the Speckled Band. Hello, Gigi McNally. How are you? By Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Let's begin. On glancing over my notes of the 70-odd cases in which I have, during the last 8 years, studied the methods of my friend Sherlock Holmes, I find many tragic, some comic, a large number merely strange, but none commonplace. For working as he did rather for the love of his art than for the acquirement of wealth, he refused to associate himself with any investigation which did not tend towards the unusual, and even the fantastic. All of these varied cases, however, Of all these varied cases, however, I cannot recall any which presented more singular features than that which was associated with the well-known Surrey family of the Roylotts of Stoke Moran. The events in question occurred in the early days of my association with Holmes, when we were sharing rooms as bachelors in Baker Street. It is possible that I might have placed them upon record before, but a promise of secrecy was made at the time, from which I have only been freed during the last month by the untimely death of the lady to whom the pledge was given. It is perhaps as well that the facts should now come to light, for I have reasons to know that there are widespread rumors as to the death of Dr. Grimsby Roylott, which tend to make the matter even more terrible than the truth. It was early in April in the year 1883 that I woke one morning to find Sherlock Holmes standing, fully dressed, by the side of my bed. He was a late riser, as a rule, and as the clock on the mantelpiece showed me that it was only 7:15, I blinked up at him in some surprise, and perhaps just a little resentment, for I was myself regular in my habits. "Very sorry to knock you up, Watson," said he, "but it's the common lot this morning. Mrs. Hudson has been knocked up," she retorted upon me, "and I on you." "What is it, then? A fire?" "No, a client. It seems that a young lady has arrived in a considerable state of excitement, who insists upon seeing me. She is waiting now in the sitting-room. Now, when young ladies wander about the metropolis at this hour of the morning and knock sleepily people up out of their beds, I presume that it is something very pressing which they have to communicate. Should it prove to be an interesting case, you would, I am sure, wish to follow it from the outset. I thought at any rate that I should call you and give you the chance." "My dear fellow, I would not miss it for anything." I had no keener pleasure than in following Holmes in his professional investigations and in admiring the rapid deductions as swift as institutions, and yet always founded on a logical basis with which he unravelled the problems which were submitted to him. I rapidly threw on my clothes, and was ready in a few minutes to accompany my friend down to the sitting-room. A lady, dressed in black and heavily veiled, who had been sitting in the window, rose as we entered. "Good morning, madam," said Holmes cheerily. "My name is Sherlock Holmes. This is my intimate friend and associate, Dr. Watson, before whom you can speak as freely as before myself. Ha! I am glad to see that Mrs. Hudson has had the good sense to light the fire. Pray draw up to it, and I shall order you a cup of hot coffee, for I observe that you are shivering." "It is not cold which makes me shiver," said the woman in a low voice, changing her seat as requested. "What then?" "It is fear, Mr. Holmes. It is terror." She raised her veil as she spoke, and we could see that she was indeed in a pitiable state of agitation, her face all drawn and grey, with restless, frightened eyes, like those of some hunted animal. Her features and figure were those of a woman of 30, but her hair was shot with premature grey, and her expression was weary and haggard. Sherlock Holmes ran her over with one of his quick and all-comprehensive glances. "You must not fear," he said soothingly, bending forward and patting her forearm. "We shall soon set matters right, I have no doubt. You have come in by train this morning, I see." "You know me, then?" "No, but I observed the second half of a return ticket in the palm of your left glove. You must have started early, and yet you had a good drive in a dog-cart along with heavy roads before you reached the station." The lady gave a violent start and stared in bewilderment at my companion. "There is no mystery, my dear madam," said he, smiling. "The left arm of your jacket is spattered with mud in no less than 7 places. The marks are perfectly fresh. There is no vehicle save a dog-cart which throws up mud in that way, and then only when you sit on the left-hand side of the driver. Whatever your reasons may be, you are perfectly correct," she said. "I started from home before 6, reached Leatherhead at 20 past, and came in by the first train to Waterloo. Sir, I can stand this strain no longer. I shall go mad if it continues. I have no one to turn to, none, save only one who cares for me, and he, poor fellow, can be of little aid. I have heard of you, Mr. Holmes. I have heard of you from Mrs. Farintosh, whom you helped in the hour of her sore need. It was from her that I had your address. Oh, sir, do you not think that you could help me too, and at least throw a little light through the dense darkness which surrounds me? At present it is out of my power to reward you for your services, but in a month or 6 weeks I shall be married, with the control of my own income, and then at least you shall not find me ungrateful." Holmes turned to his desk, and unlocking it, drew out a small case-book which he consulted. "Farintosh," said he. "Ah, yes, I recall the case. It was concerned with an opal tiara. I think it was before your time, Watson. I can only say, madam, that I shall be happy to devote the same care to your case as I did to that of your friend. As to reward, my profession is its own reward, but you are at liberty to defray whatever expenses I may be put to at the time which suits you best. And now I beg that you will lay before us everything that may help us in forming an opinion upon the matter." "Alas," replied our visitor, "the very horror of my situation lies in the fact that my fears are so vague, and my suspicions depend so entirely upon small points, which might seem trivial to another, that even he to whom of all others I have a right to look for help and advice looks upon all that I tell him about it as the fancies of a nervous woman. He does not say so, but I can read it from his soothing answers and averted eyes. But I have heard, Mr. Holmes, that you can see deeply into the manifold wickedness of the human heart. You may advise me how to walk amid the dangers which encompass me." "I am all attention, madam." "My name is Helen Stoner, and I am living with my stepfather, who is the last survivor of one of the oldest Saxon families in England, the Roylotts of Stoke Moran, on the western border of Surrey." Holmes nodded his head. "The name is familiar to me," said he. "The family was at one time among the richest in England, and the estates extended over the borders into Berkshire in the north and Hampshire in the west. In the last century, however, 4 successive heirs were of a dissolute and wasteful disposition, and the family ruin was eventually completed by a gambler in the days of the Regency. Nothing was left save a few acres of ground, and the 200-year-old house, which is itself crushed under a heavy mortgage. The last squire dragged out his existence there, living the horrible life of an aristocratic pauper, but his only son, my stepfather, seeing that he must adapt himself to the new conditions, obtained an advance from a relative, which enabled him to take a medical degree, and went out to Calcutta, where, by his professional skill and his force of character, he established a large practice. In a fit of anger, however, caused by some robberies which had been perpetrated in the house,
he beat his native butler to death and narrowly escaped a capital sentence. As it was, he suffered a long term of imprisonment, and afterwards returned to England a morose and disappointed man. When Dr. Roylott was in India, he married my mother, Mrs. Stoner, the young widow of Major General Stoner of the Bengal Artillery. My sister Julia and I were twins, and we were only 2 years old at the time of my mother's remarriage. She had a considerable sum of money, not less than £1,000 a year, and this she bequeathed to Dr. Roylott entirely while we resided with him, with the provision that a certain annual sum be allowed to each of us in the event of our marriage. Shortly after our return to England, my mother died. She was killed 8 years ago in a railway accident near Crewe. Dr. Roylott then abandoned his attempts to establish himself in practice in London, and took us to live with him in the old ancestral house at Stoke Moran. The money which my mother had left was enough for all our wants, and there seemed to be no obstacle to our happiness. But a terrible change came over our stepfather about this time. Instead of making friends and exchanging visits with our neighbours, who had at first been overjoyed to see a Roylott of Stoke Moran back in the old family seat, he shut himself up in his house, and seldom came out to save to indulge in ferocious quarrels with whoever might cross his path. Violence of temper approaching to mania has been hereditary in the men of the family, and in my stepfather's case it had, I believe, been intensified by his long residence in the tropics. A series of disgraceful brawls took place, 2 of which ended up in the police court, until at last he became the terror of the village, and the folks would fly at his approach, for he is a man of immense strength and absolutely uncontrollable in his anger. Last week he hurled the local blacksmith over a parapet into a stream, and it was only by paying over all the money which I could gather together that I was able to avert another public exposure. He had no friends at all save the wandering gypsies, and he would give these vagabonds leave to camp upon a few acres of bramble-covered land which represent the family estate, and would accept in return the hospitality of their tents, wandering away with them sometimes for weeks on end. He has a passion also for Indian animals, which are sent over to him by a correspondent, and he has at this moment a cheetah and a baboon, which wander freely over his grounds and are feared by the villagers almost as much as their master. You can imagine from what I say that my poor sister Julia and I had no great pleasure in our lives. No servant would stay with us, and for a long time we did all the work of the house. She was but 30 at the time of her death, and yet her hair had already begun to whiten, even as mine has.
Your sister is dead, then?
She died just 2 years ago, and it is of her death that I wish to speak to you. You can understand that, living the life which I have described, we were little likely to see anyone of our own age and position. We had, however, an aunt, my mother's maiden sister, Miss Honoria Westphale, who lives near Harrow, and we were occasionally allowed to pay short visits at this lady's house. Julia went there at Christmas 2 years ago, and met there a half-pay major of Marines, to whom she became engaged. My stepfather learned of the engagement when my sister returned, and offered no objection to the marriage, but within a fortnight of the day which had been fixed for their wedding, the terrible event occurred which has deprived me of my only companion.
Sherlock Holmes had been leaning back in his chair with his eyes closed and his head sunk in a cushion, but he half opened his lids now, and glanced across at his visitor. "Pray, be precise as to the details," he said.
It is easy for me to be so, for every event that dreadful time is seared. Every event of that dreadful time is seared into my memory. The manor house is, as I have already said, very old, and only one wing is now inhabited. The bedrooms in this wing are on the ground floor, the sitting rooms being in the central block of the buildings. Of these bedrooms, the first is Dr. Roylett's, the second my sister's, and the third my own. There is no communication between them, but they all open out into the same corridor. Do I make myself plain?
Perfectly so.
The windows of the 3 rooms open out upon the lawn. That fatal night Dr. Roylott had gone to his room early, though we knew that he had not retired to rest, for my sister was troubled by the smell of the strong Indian cigars which it was his custom to smoke. She left her room, therefore, and came into mine, where she sat for some time, chatting about her approaching wedding. At 11 o'clock she rose to leave me, but she paused at the door and looked back. "Tell me, Helen," she said, "have you ever heard anyone whistle in the dead of night?" "Never," said I. "I suppose that you could not possibly whistle yourself in your sleep." "Certainly not. But why?" "Because during the last few nights I have always, about 3 in the morning, heard a low, clear whistle. I am a light sleeper, and it has awakened me. I cannot tell where it came from. Perhaps from the next room, perhaps from the lawn. I thought that I would just ask you whether you had heard it." "No, I have not. It must be those wretched gypsies in the plantation." "Very likely. Yet if it were on the lawn, I wonder that you did not hear it also." "Ah, but I sleep more heavily than you." "Well, it is of no great consequence at any rate." She smiled back at me, closed my door, and a few moments later I heard her key turn in the lock.
"Indeed," said Holmes. Was it your custom to always lock yourselves in at night?"
"Always."
"And why?"
"I think I had mentioned to you that the doctor kept a cheetah and a baboon. We had no feeling of security unless our doors were locked."
"Quite so. Pray, proceed with your statement."
"I could not sleep that night. A vague feeling of impending misfortune impressed me. My sister and I, you will recollect, were twins, and you know how subtle are the links which bind 2 souls which are so closely allied. It was a wild night. The night was howling outside, and the rain was beating and splashing against the windows. Suddenly, amid all the hubbub of the gale, there burst forth the wild scream of a terrified woman. I knew that it was my sister's voice. I sprang from my bed, wrapped a shawl round me, and rushed into the corridor. As I opened my door, I seemed to hear a low whistle, such as my sister described, and a few moments later a clanging sound as if a mass metal had fallen. As I ran down the passage, my sister's door was unlocked and revolved slowly upon its hinges. I stared at it, horror-stricken, not knowing what was about to issue from it. By the light of the corridor lamp I saw my sister appear at the opening, her face blanched with terror, her hands groping for help, her whole figure swaying to and fro like that of a drunkard. I ran to her and threw my arms around her. But at that moment her knees seemed to give way, and she fell to the ground. She writhed as one who is in terrible pain, and her limbs were dreadfully convulsed. At first I thought that she had not recognized me, but as I bent over her she suddenly shrieked out in a voice which I shall never forget, "Oh, my God, Helen! It was the band! The speckled band!" There was something else which she would fain have said and she stabbed with her finger into the air in the direction of the doctor's room. but a fresh convulsion seized her and choked her words. I rushed out, calling loudly for my stepfather, and I met him hastening from his room in his dressing-gown. When he reached my sister's side, she was unconscious, and though he poured brandy down her throat and sent for medical aid from the village, all efforts were in vain, for she slowly sank and died without having recovered her consciousness. Such was the dreadful end of my beloved sister.
"One moment," said Holmes. "Are you sure about this whistle and metallic sound? Could you swear to it?"
That was what the county coroner asked me at the inquiry. It is my strong impression that I heard it, and yet, among the crash of the gale and the creaking of an old house, I may possibly have been deceived.
"Was your sister dressed?"
No, she was in her nightdress. In her right hand was found the charred stump of a match, in her left a matchbox.
"Showing that she had struck a light and looked about her when the alarm took place. That is important. And what conclusions did the coroner come to?"
He investigated the case with great care, for Dr. Roylett's conduct had long been notorious in the county, but he was unable to find any satisfactory cause of death. My evidence showed that the door had been fastened upon the inner side, and the windows were blocked by old-fashioned shutters with broad iron bars which were secured every night. The walls were carefully sounded, and were shown to be quite solid all round, and the flooring was also thoroughly examined with the same result. The chimney is wide, but it is barred up by 4 large staples. It is certain, therefore, that my sister was quite alone when she met her end. Besides, there were no marks of any violence upon her.
Oops. "How about poison?"
The doctors examined her for it, but without success.
"What do you think this unfortunate lady died of, then?"
It is my belief that she died of pure fear and nervous shock, though what it was that frightened her I cannot imagine.
"Were there gypsies in the plantation at that time?"
Yes, there are nearly always some.
"Ah. And what did you gather from this allusion to a band, a speckled band?"
Sometimes I have thought that it was merely the wild talk of delirium, sometimes that it may have referred to some band of people, perhaps to those very gypsies in the plantation. I do not know whether the spotted handkerchiefs which so many of them wear over their heads might have suggested the strange adjective which she used.
Holmes shook his head like a man who is far from being satisfied. "These are very deep waters," said he. "Pray, go on with your narrative."
2 years have passed since then, and my life has been until lately lonelier than ever. A month ago, however, a dear friend whom I have known for many years has done me the honor to ask my hand in marriage. His name is Armitage, Percy Armitage, the second son of Mr. Armitage of Cranewater, near Reading. My stepfather has offered no opposition to the match, and we are to be married in the course of the spring. 2 days ago some repairs were started in the west wing of the building, and my bedroom wall has been pierced, so that I have had to move into the chamber in which my sister died, and to sleep in the very bed in which she slept. Imagine then my thrill of terror when last night, as I lay awake thinking over her terrible fate, I suddenly heard in the silence of the night the low whistle which had been the herald of her own death. I sprang up and lit the lamp, but nothing was to be seen in the room. I was too shaken to go to bed again, however, so I dressed. And as soon as it was daylight, I slipped down, got a dog-cart at the Crown Inn, which is opposite, and drove to Leatherhead, from whence I have come on this morning with one object of seeing you and asking your advice.
You have done wisely, said my friend. But have you told me all?
Yes, all.
Miss Roylott, you have not. You are screening your stepfather.
Why? What do you mean?
For answer, Holmes pushed back the frill of black lace which fringed the hand that lay upon our visitor's knee. 5 little livid spots, the marks of 4 fingers and a thumb, were printed upon the right white wrist. You have been cruelly used, said Holmes. The lady colored deeply and covered over her injured wrist.
He is a hard man, she said, and perhaps he hardly knows his own strength.
There was a long silence, during which Holmes leaned his chin upon his hands and stared into the crackling fire. This is very deep business, he said at last. There are 1,000 details which I should desire to know before I decide upon our course of action, yet we have not a moment to lose. If we were to come to Stoke Moran today, would it be possible for us to see over these rooms without the knowledge of your stepfather?
As it happens, he spoke of coming into town today upon some most important business. It is probable that he will be away all day, and that there would be nothing to disturb you. We have a housekeeper now, but she is old and foolish, and I could easily get her to stay out of the way.
Excellent. You are not averse to this trip, Watson? By no means. Then we shall both come. What are you going to do yourself?
I have 1 or 2 things which I would wish to do now that I am in town, but I shall return by 12 o'clock train, so as to be there in time for your coming.
And you may expect us early in the afternoon. I have myself some small business matters to attend to. Will you not wait and breakfast?
No, I must go. My heart is lightened already since I have confided my trouble in you. I shall look forward to seeing you again this afternoon.
She dropped her thick black veil over her face and glided from the room. And what do you think of it all, Watson? Asked Sherlock Holmes, leaning back in his chair. It seems to me to be a most dark and sinister business. Dark enough and sinister enough. Yet if the lady is correct in saying that the flooring and walls are sound, and that the door, window, and chimney are impassable, then her sister must have been undoubtedly alone when she met her mysterious end. What becomes, then, of these nocturnal whistles, and what of the very peculiar words of the dying woman? I cannot think. When you combine the ideas of whistles at night, the presence of a band of gypsies who are on intimate terms with this old doctor, the fact that we have every reason to believe the doctor has an interest in preventing his stepdaughter's marriage, the dying allusion to a band, and finally the fact that Miss Helen Stoner heard a metallic clang, which might have been caused by one of those metal bars that secured the shutters falling back into its place, I think that there is good ground to think that the mystery may be cleared along those lines. But what then did the gypsies do? I cannot imagine. I see many objections to any such theory. And so do I. It is precisely for that reason that we are going to Stoke Moran this day, and I want to see whether the objections are fatal, or if they may be explained away. But what in the name of the devil? The ejaculation had been drawn from my companion by the fact that our door had been suddenly dashed upon, and that a huge man had framed himself in the aperture. His costume was a peculiar mixture of the professional and of the agricultural, having a black top hat and a long frock coat and a pair of high gaiters with a hunting crop swinging in his hands, so tall that his hat actually brushed the crossbar of the doorway, and his breadth seemed to span it across from side to side. A large face, seared with 1,000 wrinkles, burned yellow with the sun, and marked with every evil passion, was turned from one to the other of us, while his deep-set, bile-shot eyes and his high, thin, fleshless nose gave him somewhat the resemblance of a fierce old bird of prey. "Which of you is Holmes?" asked the apparition. My name, sir, but you have the advantage of me," said my companion quietly. "I am Dr. Grimsby Roylott of Stoke Moran." "Indeed, doctor," said Holmes blandly. "Pray, take a seat." "I will do nothing of the kind. My stepdaughter has been here. I have traced her. What has she been saying to you?" "It is a little cold for the time of year," said Holmes. "What has she been saying to you?" screamed the old man furiously. "But I have heard that the crocuses promise well," continued my companion imperturbably. "Ha! You put me off, do you?" said our new visitor, taking a step forward and shaking his hunting crop. "I know you, you scoundrel. I have heard of you before. You are Holmes, the meddler." My friend smiled. "Holmes, the busybody." His smile broadened. "Holmes, the Scotland Yard Jack in office." Holmes chuckled heartily. "Your conversation is most entertaining," said he. "When you go out, close the door, for there is a decided draught." "I will go when I have my say. Don't you dare meddle in my affairs. I know that Miss Stoner has been here. I traced her. I am a dangerous man to fall foul of. See here." He stepped swiftly forward, seized the poker, and bent it into a curve with his huge brown hands. "See that you keep yourself out of my grip." He snarled and hurled the twisted poker into the fireplace and strode out of the room. "Now, he seems a very amiable person," said Holmes, laughing. "I'm not quite so bulky, but if he had remained I might have shown him that my grip was not much more feeble than his own." As he spoke, he picked up the steel poker and, with a sudden effort, straightened it out again. "Fancy his having the insolence to confound me with the official detective force. This incident gives zest to our investigation, however, and I only trust that our little friend will not suffer from her impudence in allowing this brute to trace her. Now, Watson, we shall order breakfast, and afterwards I shall walk down to Doctors' Commons, where I hope to get some data which may help us in this matter." It was nearly 1 o'clock when Sherlock Holmes returned from his excursion. He held in his hand a sheet of blue paper scrawled over with notes and figures. "I have seen the will of the deceased wife," he said. To determine its exact meaning, I have been obliged to work out the present prices of the investments with which it is concerned. The total income, which at the time of the wife's death was little short of £1,100, is now, through the fall in agricultural prices, not more than £750. Each daughter can claim an income of £250 in case of marriage. It is evident, therefore, that if both girls had married, this beauty would have had a mere pittance, while even one of them would cripple him to a very serious extent. My morning's work has not been wasted, since it has proved that he has the very strongest motives for standing in the way of anything of the sort. And now, Watson, this is too serious for dawdling, especially as the old man is aware that we are interesting ourselves in his affairs. So if you are ready, we shall call a cab and drive to Waterloo. I should be very much obliged if you would slip your revolver into your pocket. An Ellie's number 2 is an excellent argument with gentlemen who can twist steel pokers into knots. That and a toothbrush are, I think, all that we need. At Waterloo, we were fortunate in catching a train for Leatherhead, where we hired a trap at the station and drove for 4 or 5 miles through the lovely Surrey lanes. It was a perfect day, with a bright sun and a few fleecy clouds in the heavens. The trees and wayside hedges were just throwing out their first green shoots, and the air was full of the pleasant smell of the moist earth. To me, at least, there was a strange contrast between the sweet promise of the spring and this sinister quest upon which we were engaged. My companion sat in the front of the trap, his arms folded, his hat pulled down over his eyes, and his chin sunk upon his breast, buried in the deepest thought. Suddenly, however, he started, tapped me on the shoulder, and pointed over the meadows. "Look there," said he. A heavily timbered park stretched up in a gentle slope, thickening into a grove at the highest point. From amid the branches there jutted out the grey gables and high roof tree of a very old mansion. "Stoke Moran?" said he. "Yes, sir. That be the house of Dr. Grimsby Roylott," remarked the driver. "There is some building going on there," said Holmes. "That is where we're going." "There's the village," said the driver, pointing to a cluster of roofs some distance to the left. "But if you want to get to the house, you'll find it shorter to get over this stile, and so by the footpath over the fields. There it is where the lady is walking." "And the lady, I fancy, is Miss Stoner," observed Holmes, shading his eyes. "Yes, I think we had better do as you suggest." We got off, paid our fare, and the trap rattled back on its way to Leatherhead. "I thought it as well," said Holmes, as we climbed the stile, "that this fellow should think we had come here as architects or on some definite business. It may stop his gossip. Good afternoon, Miss Stoner. You see that we have been as good as our word." Our client of the morning had hurried forward to meet with us with a face which spoke her joy. "I have been waiting so eagerly for you," she cried, shaking hands with us warmly, "as all has turned out splendidly. Dr. Roylott has gone to town, and it is unlikely that he will be back before evening." "We have had the pleasure of making the doctor's acquaintance," said Holmes, and in a few words he sketched out what had occurred. Mrs. Stoner turned white to the lips as she listened. "Good heavens!" she cried. "He has followed me, then?" "So it appears." "He is so cunning that I never know when I am safe from him. What will he say when he returns?" "He must guard himself, for he may find that there is someone more cunning than himself upon his track. You must lock yourself up from him tonight. If he is violent, we shall take you away to your aunt's house in Harrow. Now we must make the best use of our time, so kindly take us at once to the rooms which we are to examine." The building was of grey lichen-blotched stone, with a high central portion and two curving wings, like the claws of a crab, thrown out on each side. In one of these wings the windows were broken and blocked with wooden boards, while the roof was partly caved in, and a picture of ruin. The central portion was in little better repair, but the right-hand block was comparatively modern, and the blinds in the windows, with the blue smoke curling up from the chimneys, showed that this was where the family resided. Some scaffolding had been erected against the end wall, and the stonework had been broken into, but there were no signs of any workmen at the moment of our visit. Holmes walked slowly up and down the ill-trimmed lawn, and examined with deep attention the outsides of the windows. "This, I take it, belongs to the room in which you used to sleep, the centre one to your sister's, and the one next to the main building to be Dr. Roylett's chamber."
"Exactly so. But I am now sleeping in the middle one."
"Pending the alterations, as I understand. By the way, there does not seem to be any very pressing need for repairs at that end wall."
"There were none. I believe that it was an excuse to move me from my room."
"Ah, that is suggestive. Now, on the other side of this narrow wing runs the corridor from which these three rooms open. There are windows in it, of course?"
"Yes, but very small ones, too narrow for anyone to pass through."
"As you both locked your doors at night, your rooms were unapproachable from that side. Now, would you have the kindness to go into your room and bar your shutters?" Mrs. Stoner did so, and Holmes, after a careful examination through the open window, endeavored in every way to force the shutter open without success. There was no slit through which a knife could be passed to raise the bar. Then, with his lens, he tested the hinges, but they were of solid iron, built firmly into the massive masonry. Said he, scratching his chin in some perplexity. "My theory certainly presents some difficulties. But no one could pass these shutters if they were bolted. Well, we shall see if the inside throws any light upon the matter." A small side door led into the whitewashed corridor from which the three bedrooms opened. Holmes refused to examine the third chamber, so we passed at once to the second, that in which Miss Stoner was now sleeping, and in which her sister had met with her fate. It was a homely little room, with a low ceiling and a gaping fireplace, after the fashion of old country houses. A brown chest of drawers stood in one corner, a narrow white counterpaned bed in another, and a dressing-table on the left-hand side of the window. These articles, with two small wicker-work chairs, made up all the furniture in the room, save for a square of Wilton carpet in the center. The boards round and the paneling of the walls were of brown worm-eaten oak, so old and discolored that it may have dated from the original building of the house. Holmes drew one of the chairs into the corner and sat silent, while his eyes traveled round and up and down, taking in every detail of the apartment. "Where does that bell communicate with?" he asked at last, pointing to a thick bell rope which hung down beside the bed, the tassel actually lying upon the pillow.
"It goes to the housekeeper's room."
"It looks newer than the other things."
"Yes, it was only put there a couple of years ago."
"Your sister asked for it, I suppose?"
"No, I never heard of her using it. We used always to get what we wanted for ourselves."
"Indeed. It seemed unnecessary to put so nice a bell pull there. You will excuse me for a few minutes while I satisfy myself as to this floor. He threw himself down upon his face with his lens in his hand and crawled swiftly backward and forward, examining minutely the cracks between the boards. Then he did the same with the woodwork with which the chamber was paneled. Finally, he walked over to the bed and spent some time in staring at it and in running his eye up and down the wall. Finally, he took the bell rope in his hand and gave it a brisk tug. "Why, it's a dummy," said he.
"Won't it ring?"
"No, it's not even attached to a wire. This is very interesting. You can see now that it is fastened to a hook just above where the little opening for the ventilator is."
"How very absurd! I never noticed that before."
"Very strange," muttered Holmes, pulling at the rope. "There are one or two very singular points about this room. For example, what a fool a builder must be to open a ventilator into another room, when with the same trouble he might have communicated with the outside air."
"That is also quite modern," said the lady.
"Done about the same time as the bell rope," remarked Holmes.
"Yes. There were several little changes carried out about that time."
"They seem to have been of a most interesting character. Dummy bell ropes and ventilators which do not ventilate. With your permission, Miss Stoner, we shall now carry our researches into the inner apartment." Dr. Grimsby Roylett's chamber was larger than that of his stepdaughter, but was plainly furnished. A camp bed, a small wooden shelf full of books, mostly of a technical character, an armchair beside the bed, a plain wooden chair against the wall, and a round table and a large iron safe were the principal things which met the eye. Holmes walked slowly around and examined each and all of them with the keenest of interest. "What's in here?" he asked, tapping the safe.
"My stepfather's business papers."
"Oh, you've seen inside, then?"
"Only once, some years ago. I remember that it was full of papers."
"There isn't a cat in it, for example?"
"No. What a strange idea."
"Well, look at this." He took up a small saucer of milk which stood on the top of it.
"No, we don't keep a cat. But there is a cheetah and a baboon."
"Ah, yes, of course. Well, a cheetah is just a big cat, and yet a saucer of milk does not go very far in satisfying its wants, I dare say. There is one point which I wish to determine." He squatted down in front of the wooden chair and examined the seat of it with the greatest attention. "Thank you. That is quite settled," said he, rising and putting his lens in his pocket. "Hello, here is something interesting." The object which had caught his eye was a small dog leash hung on one corner of the bed. The leash, however, was curled upon itself and tied so as to make a loop of whipcord. What do you make of that, Watson? "It's a common enough leash, but I don't know why it should be tied." "That is not quite so common, is it?" "Ah, me. It's a wicked world, and when a clever man turns his brains to crime, it is the worst of all. I think that I have seen enough now, Miss Stoner, and with your permission we shall walk out upon the lawn." I had never seen my friend's face so grim or his brow so dark as it was when we turned from the scene of the investigation. We had walked several times up and down the lawn, neither Miss Stoner nor myself liking to break in upon his thoughts before he roused himself from his reverie. "It is very essential, Miss Stoner," said he,
that you should absolutely follow my advice in every respect. I shall most certainly do so. The matter is too serious for any hesitation. Your life may depend upon your compliance. I assure you that I am in your hands. In the first place, both my friend and I must spend the night in your room. Both Miss Stoner and I gazed at him in astonishment. Yes, it must be so. Let me explain. I believe that it is the village inn over there. Yes, that is the Crown. Very good. Your windows would be visible from there? Certainly. You must confine yourself to your room on the pretense of a headache when your stepfather comes back. Then, when you hear him retire for the night, you must open the shutters of your window, undo the hasp, put your lamp there as a signal to us, and then withdraw quietly with everything which you are likely to want into the room which you use to occupy. I have no doubt that in spite of the repairs, you could manage there for one night. Oh, yes, easily. The rest you will leave in our hands. But what will you do? We shall spend the night in your room, and we shall investigate the cause of this noise which has disturbed you. I believe, Mr. Holmes, that you have already made up your mind, said Miss Stoner, laying her hand upon my companion's sleeve. Perhaps I have. Then, for pity's sake, tell me what was the cause of my sister's death. I should prefer to have clearer proofs before I speak. You can at least tell me whether my own thought is correct, and if she died from some sudden fright. No, I do not think so. I think that there was probably some more tangible cause. And now, Miss Stoner, we must leave you, for if Dr. Roylott returned and saw us, our journey would be in vain. Goodbye, and be brave, for if you will do what I have told you, you may rest assured that we shall soon drive away the dangers that threaten you. Sherlock Holmes and I had no difficulty in engaging a bedroom and sitting-room at the Crown Inn. They were on the upper floor, and from our window we could command a view of the avenue gate and of the inhabited wing of Stoke Moran Manor House. At dusk we saw Dr. Grimsby Roylott drive past, his huge form looming up from beside the little figure of the lad who drove him. The boy had some slight difficulty in undoing the heavy iron gates, and we heard the hoarse roar of the doctor's voice and saw the fury with which he shook his clenched fists at him. The trap drove on, and a few minutes later we saw a sudden light spring up among the trees as the lamp was lit in one of the sitting-rooms. "Do you know, Watson," said Holmes, as we sat together in the gathering darkness, "I have really some scruples as to taking you tonight. There is a distinct element of danger." "Can I be of assistance?" "Your presence might be invaluable." Then I shall certainly come. It is very kind of you." "You speak of danger. You have evidently seen more in these rooms than was visible to me?" "No, but I fancy that I may have deduced a little more. I imagine that you saw all that I did." "I saw nothing remarkable save the bell-rope, and what purpose that could answer, I confess, is more than I can imagine." "You saw the ventilator, too?" "Yes, but I do not think that it is such a very unusual thing that I have to have a small opening between two rooms. It was so small that a rat could hardly pass through." "I knew that we should find a ventilator before ever we came to Stoke Moran." "My dear Holmes." "Oh, yes, I did. You remember in her statement that she said that her sister could smell Dr. Roylett's cigar. Now, of course, that suggested at once that there must be a communication between the two rooms. It could only be a small one, or it would have been remarked upon at the coroner's inquiry. I deduced a ventilator. But what harm can there be in that? Well, there is at least a curious coincidence of dates. A ventilator was made, a cord is hung, and a lady who sleeps in the bed dies. Does not that strike you? I cannot as yet see any connection. Did you observe anything peculiar about the bed? No. It was clamped to the floor. Did you ever see a bed fastened like that before? I cannot say that I have. The lady could not move her bed. It must always be in the same relative position to the ventilator and to the rope, or so we may call it, since it was clearly never meant for a bell-pull. Holmes, I cried, I seem to see dimly what you are hinting at. We are only just in time to prevent some subtle and horrible crime. Subtle enough and horrible enough. When a doctor does go wrong, he is the first of criminals. He has nerve, and he has knowledge. Palmer and Pritchard were among the heads of their profession. This man strikes even deeper, but I think, Watson, that we shall be able to strike deeper still. But we shall have horrors enough before the night is over. For goodness' sake, let us have a quiet pipe and turn our minds for a few hours to something more cheerful. About 9 o'clock, the light among the trees was extinguished, and all was dark in the direction of the manor house. 2 hours passed slowly away. Then suddenly, just at the stroke of 11, a single bright light shone right in front of us. "That is our signal," said Holmes, springing to his feet. "It comes from the middle window." As we passed out, he exchanged a few words with the landlord, explaining that we were going on a late visit to an acquaintance, and that it was possible that we might spend the night there. A moment later we were out on the dark road, a chill wind blowing in our faces, and one yellow light twinkling in front of us through the gloom to guide us to our somber errand. There was little difficulty in entering the grounds, for unrepaired breaches gaped in the old park wall. Making our way among the trees, we reached the lawn, crossed it, and were about to enter through the window, when out from a clump of laurel bushes there darted what seemed to be a hideous, distorted child, who threw itself upon the grass with writhing limbs and then ran swiftly across the lawn into the darkness. "My God!" I whispered. "Did you see it?" Holmes was for the moment as startled as I. His hand closed like a vice upon my wrist in his agitation. Then he broke into a low laugh and put his lips to my ear. "It is a nice household," he murmured. "That is the baboon." I had forgotten the strange pets which the doctor affected. There was a cheetah, too. Perhaps we might find it upon our shoulders at any moment. I confess that I felt easier in my mind after following Holmes' example and slipping off my shoes. I found myself inside the bedroom. My companion noiselessly closed the shutters, moved the lamp onto the table, and cast his eyes around the room. All was as we had seen it in the daytime. Then, creeping up to me and making a trumpet of his hand, he whispered into my ear again, so gently that it was all that I could do to distinguish the words. "The least sound would be fatal to our plans.
I nodded to show that I had heard. "We must sit without light. He would see it through the ventilator." I nodded again. "Do not go to sleep. Your very life may depend upon it. Have your pistol ready in case we should need it. I will sit on the side of the bed, and you in that chair." I took out my revolver and laid it on the corner of the table. Holmes had brought up a long, thin cane, and this he placed upon the bed beside him. By it he laid the box of matches and the stump of a candle. Then he turned down the lamp, and we were left in darkness. How shall I ever forget that dreadful vigil? I could not hear a sound, not even the drawing of a breath. And yet I knew that my companion sat open-eyed, within a few feet of me, in the same state of nervous tension in which I was myself. The shutters cut off the least ray of light, and we waited in absolute darkness. From outside came the occasional cry of a night-bird, and once at our very window a long-drawn cat-like whine which told us that the cheetah was indeed at liberty. Far away we could hear the deep tones of the parish clock, which boomed out every quarter of an hour. How long they seemed, those quarters! 12 struck, and 1, and 2, and 3, and still we sat waiting silently for whatever might befall. Suddenly there was a momentary gleam of a light up in the direction of the ventilator, which vanished immediately, but was succeeded by a strong smell of burning oil and heated metal. Someone in the next room had lit a dark lantern. I heard a gentle sound of movement, and then all was silent. Once more, though the smell grew stronger. For half an hour I sat with straining ears. Then, suddenly, another sound became audible. A gentle, soothing sound like a small jet of steam escaping continually from a kettle. The instant we heard it, Holmes sprang from the bed, struck a match, and lashed furiously with his cane at the bell-pull. "You see it, Watson?" he yelled. "You see it?" But I saw nothing. At the moment when Holmes struck the light, I heard a low, clear whistle, but the sudden glare flashing into my weary eyes made it impossible for me to tell what it was at which my friend lashed so savagely. I could, however, see that his face was deadly pale and filled with horror and loathing. He had ceased to strike and was gazing up at the ventilator when suddenly there broke from the silence of the night the most horrible cry to which I have ever listened. It swelled up louder and louder, a hoarse yell of pain and fear and anger all mingled into one dreadful shriek. They say that away down in the village, and even in the distant parsonage, that cry raised sleepers from their beds. It struck cold to our hearts, and I stood gazing at Holmes, and he at me, until the last echoes of it had died away into the silence from which it rose. "What can it mean?" I gasped. "It means that it is all over," Holmes answered. "And perhaps, after all, it is for the best. Take your pistol, and we will enter Dr. Roylett's room." With a grave face, he lit the lamp and led the way down the corridor. Twice he struck at the chamber door without any reply from within. Then he turned the handle and entered, I at his heels with the cocked pistol in my hand. It was a singular sight which met our eyes. On the table stood a dark lantern with the shutter half open, throwing a brilliant beam of light upon the iron safe, the door of which was ajar. Beside this table, on the wooden chair, sat Dr. Grimsby Roylott, clad in a long gray dressing gown, his bare ankles protruding beneath, and his feet thrust into red heelless Turkish slippers. Across his lap lay the short stock with the long lash which we had noticed during the day. His chin was cocked upward, and his eyes were fixed in a dreadful rigid stare at the corner of the ceiling. His round brow he had a peculiar yellow band with brownish speckles, which seemed to be bound tightly around his head. As we entered, he made neither sound nor motion. "The band! The speckled band!" whispered Holmes. I took a step forward. In an instant his strange headgear began to move, and there reared itself from among his hair and squat diamond-shaped head and puffed neck of a loathsome serpent. "It is a swamp adder!" cried Holmes, "the deadliest snake in India. He has died within 10 seconds of being bitten. Violence does, in truth, recoil upon the violent, and the schemer falls into the pit which he digs for another. Let us thrust this creature back into its den, and we can then remove Miss Stoner to some place of shelter, and let the county police know what has happened." As he spoke, he drew the dog-whip swiftly from the dead man's lap, and throwing the noose around the reptile's neck, he drew it from its horrid perch, and carrying it at arm's length, threw it into the iron safe, which he closed upon it. Such are the true facts of the death of Dr. Grimsby Roylott of Stoke Moran. It is not necessary that I should prolong a narrative which has already run too great a length by telling how we broke the sad news to the terrified girl, how we conveyed her by the morning train to the care of her good aunt in Harrow, of how the slow process of the official inquiry came to the conclusion that the doctor met his fate while indiscreetly playing with a dangerous pet. The little which I had yet to learn of the case was told me by Sherlock Holmes as we travelled back the next day. "I had," said he, "come to an entirely erroneous conclusion, which shows, my dear Watson, how dangerous it always is to reason from insufficient data. The presence of the gypsies, and the use of the word band, which was used by the poor girl, no doubt, to explain the appearance which she had caught a hurried glimpse of by the light of her match, were sufficient to put me upon an entirely wrong scent. I can only claim the merit that I instantly reconsidered my position when, however, it became clear to me that whatever danger threatened an occupant of the room could not come either from the window or the door. My attention was speedily drawn, as I have already remarked to you, to this ventilator and to the bell-rope which hung down to the bed. To the discovery that this was a dummy, and that the bed was clamped to the floor, instantly gave rise to the suspicion that the rope was there as a bridge for something passing through the hole and coming to the bed. The idea of a snake instantly occurred to me, and when I coupled it with my knowledge that the doctor was furnished with a supply of creatures from India, I felt that I was probably on the right track. The idea of using a form of poison which could not possibly be discovered by any chemical test was just such a one as would occur to a clever and ruthless man who had had an Eastern training. The rapidity with which
such a poison would take effect would also, from his point of view, be an advantage. It would be a sharp-eyed coroner, indeed, who could distinguish the two little dark punctures which would show where the poison fangs had done their work. Then I thought of the whistle. Of course, he must recall the snake before the morning light revealed it to the victim. He had trained it, probably by the use of the milk which we saw, to return to him when summoned. He would put it through this ventilator at the hour that he thought best, with the certainty that it would crawl down the rope and land on the bed. It might or might not bite the occupant. Perhaps she might escape every night for a week, but sooner or later she must fall victim. I had come to these conclusions before I ever entered his room. An inspection of his chair showed me that he had been in the habit of standing on it, which of course would be necessary in order that he should reach the ventilator. The sight of the safe, the saucer of milk, the loop of whipcord were enough to finally dispel any doubts which may have remained. The metallic clang heard by Miss Stoner was obviously caused by her stepfather hastily closing the door of his safe upon its terrible occupant. Having once made up my mind, you know the steps which I took in order to put the matter to the proof. I heard the creature hiss, as I have no doubt that you did also, and I instantly lit the light and attacked it, with the result of driving it through the ventilator, and also with the result of causing it to turn upon its master at the other side. Some of the blows of my cane came home and roused its snakish temper, so that it flew upon the first person it saw. In this way, I am no doubt indirectly responsible for Dr. Grimsby Roylett's death, and I cannot say that it is likely to weigh very heavily upon my conscience. That was The Adventure of the Speckled Band. So we're a little bit ahead of schedule. Yeah. So I only had 2 stories planned for tonight. But, so let me ask you guys. Do you want more Sherlock Holmes? I know it's a little bit of a departure from what we normally read, but I thought it was fun. And I mean, I honestly enjoyed it. So if you guys want more Sherlock Holmes, I will definitely, I have the entire Sherlock Holmes collection. So it's elementary. Yes. It's elementary, my dear Watson. You know, it's funny. I found out today that elementary, my dear Watson, is never said in any of the Sherlock Holmes stories. It's never says it. I found that out today. It's one of those quotes that somebody came up with it somewhere or combined it in with other quotes. Like it was like 2 quotes combined. But yeah, it never actually said it. I wouldn't mind doing some Agatha Christie. I do want to find, that's very likely. It very likely came from that. Yes, he says the word, but he says the words, but he never says it. Yes, like Play It Again, Sam. God, I love that movie. Of all the gin joints and all the towns and all the worlds, she walks into mine. I love that scene. The character of Sam is great. It's just such a good foil to Rick. And I will say, like, there's like movies out there that I think are pitch perfect, and Casablanca is one of them. I think it is probably one of the best written films. The whole banter between
Rick and the German major. The whole I love that movie. I probably watch that movie more than I watch most other movies, and it's just, yeah. Basil Rathbone. I would definitely. Yes, Buford. We hit 2,000. We hit 10,000 on Sunday. On Sunday, so yeah, it was pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. So, um, but if you guys have suggestions as to stories to read, oh, Charlotte's Web. Okay. So okay. So two things. Wings at Work. Yes, I have. Um, the only problem with some Mark Twain stories is that there is some problematic language that I would have to kind of work around. Um, I would love to do Mark Twain. But I just would have to figure that out. Um, Destiny, Charlotte's Web, absolutely hands down one of my all-time favorite books. Um, it is one that I would love to read, to do for Sunday night bedtime stories. It's a hard one for me to get through. I, you know, there's a lot of that. I've been running into there. Like, there's a great story. Um, there's a great story by O. Henry called "The Ransom of Red Chief," and there is a there is a moment in there where they refer to a rock in a very offensive way, and there it's I like some of these stories. Like, it's a great story, but it's like that bit of it makes me very hesitant to read it, um without, because it's like, I don't want to butcher the words the man's writing, but at the same time, I can't read that. I cannot read it online. Number one, and number two, I'm not comfortable with it. You know, um, it is, and the thing is, and I'm gonna voice God. I'm gonna DM you, because there's a conversation I would like to have that I don't want to say feel strongly about, but it is a conversation that I would like to have, with someone, with that lived experience. Um, yes, the Ransom of Red Chief. That it is a hilarious story. But yeah, there's some problematic language. But H.P. Lovecraft, there is some problematic language in his stories. It's something that I appreciate you, sir. It's something that's been bugging me, and I kind of want to. You're somebody I trust. I want to talk about it with. Um, so yeah, but back to what I was saying about Charlotte's Web. It's absolutely one of my favorite. Absolutely one of my favorite books, and to, um, I would love to read it for Sunday night bedtime stories, and I will get through the whole thing. I will get through the whole thing, and but there is a moment, and anyone that's read the book knows the moment when Wilbur is taken away from the fair, and Charlotte, he has her babies, and Charlotte is left behind, to, yeah. And the line that gets me every time is, "No one was with her when she died." And that line, for whatever reason, hits me so hard. And so, if y'all want to see me ugly cry, that's a good way to do it. But I will tell you I'll tell you a sweet story, about that book. I've read that book to my daughters, and they were little, And the way that we used to read was they had bunk beds, and I would sit on the floor and lean back up against their bed, and I would read the stories. And they would lay on their mattresses and look over the side of the bed, to look over my shoulder, because sometimes I would read picture books, and sometimes I would love to do a night of picture books, by the way, but I'll figure that out. But squirrel, yeah. So, and I'm reading this, and I get to that part, and I read that line out loud, and I have to put the book down because I am crying. And at that moment, both of my daughters slide off of their mattresses and sit next to me on the floor, and they both hug me. And I can't even tell you which one said it, but one of my daughters looked, they were hugging me, and they go, "Don't worry, Daddy. Wilbur has her babies, and he's going to take care of them." And I got to tell you, that just, pooh, I was done. I was done. I was like, yeah, girls, we're going to finish this book tomorrow. It was bad. Oh, my God. Yeah, you ever want to see a 50-year-old man cry? Yep. Charlotte's Web, the book. Like, I can make it through the movie. No problem. I love the movie. But holy crap, the book just hits me like a freaking steel toe boot to the chest. But if the other way you want to see me cry is E.T. Make me watch E.T. And I don't cry when we think E.T.'s dead. Spoilers, if you haven't seen it by now, that's too bad. But when he leaves at the end of the film, and he touches Elliot's chest with his finger, and he says, "I'll be right here." Done. Lose it. That movie wrecks me for days. Absolutely days. Oh, geez, Tessa, what did you do? Oh, God. It's funny because my kids, we used to read a lot of like Dr. Seuss and stuff, and I would read, I would do Green Eggs and Ham in a really, really bad impression of William Shatner. Yeah. So maybe I'll do that someday online. I would love to do a night of picture books for Sunday night bedtime story. Maybe when I have a filler week, I can do that. But yeah, I maybe I'll keep doing this format where it's a small story in the beginning and then our big feature story. So it's sort of Alice in Wonderland is definitely on my list. I have to go back through and really reread it. Not that there's any issue with it. But I haven't read it in so long that I like to kind of reread these before. I could tell that I have not read this Sherlock Holmes story in a while, so there was some stumbling over the language. Plus, I need to get new glasses, so it's really hard to read the screen sometimes. But yeah, I'm a crier. I am not. I am not a man's man, or the man's masculine. I don't do sports. I'm not a competitive person. I don't have that. I love going to sports games. I will absolutely go to like our local AAA baseball team, the Red Wings. We've got a great stadium. I love going, mostly because they have really, really super good food. And yes, yay, sports ball. And they do amazing fried dough. So yeah, that is not the first time I've been called a big teddy bear. So, and I almost went, actually with my username, I almost went with Papa Bear, but I couldn't get that one clean. So I figured I like zombies and I'm a dad. So, psh. My grandfather used to say that the measure of a man is how he treats people that can do nothing for him. And I have always tried to live up to that. Maybe someday I'll tell you guys about my grandfather. He's a pretty awesome guy. One of the kind taught me about kindness, taught me what being a real man, husband, father. I always said that if I could be even half the man that he was, that it would be a victory. You know, it's what's funny is I can still cool as a cucumber. This one time I cut my finger on a bandsaw, and I thought, oh my god, my finger. I was like 10, and cool as a cucumber. Just knew exactly what I had to do. Got me, But he was. I don't think I ever heard the man raise his voice. I appreciate that. I like to think he would be, but I never heard in the whole time. Well, he passed in 2000, so I was 25. I was almost 25 when he passed away, and no, I was 25 when he passed away. Yeah, because he passed away in September of 2000, and yeah, but so of the 25 years that man was in my life physically, I don't think I ever heard him raise his voice once. I don't think I ever heard him insult anyone. He didn't have that bone in his body, and though I will tell you, one of his favorite things was to get my grandmother going, and it was so funny. Short story. We would go out to eat at this Italian restaurant in the nearest city to the town that they lived in. And at the end of the night, this one time we went, the end of the night, we come out and we got a flat tire. So of course, I'm like 12. I'm going to go help my grandfather change the tire, which really amounted to me holding the hubcap so that he could put the nuts in it, right? So we get there, and he always had a full-size spare. No donut for this man. He was a mechanic by trade. So we get everything all set, get the spare on. We get back in the car. He throws the hubcap in the car in the trunk with the flat tire. We get back, and of course I'm the big boy. I'm sitting in the front seat with my grandfather, right? So my grandmother is in the back seat with my little sister, who's 4 years younger than me. And he starts the car, and he leans over to me and he says, we're going to have to be careful on the way home. And I'm like, why, Grandpa? And he goes, well, he says, if we're not careful, the cops are going to pull us over for indecent exposure. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he goes, the car's nuts are showing. 12 years old, giggled my head off. But my grandmother, from the back seat, Vernon, she was so pissed. It was so freaking funny. Oh, but I love that man. Taught me. I only cracked the surface of the knowledge that man had for me. And really, it's amazing. And every once in a while, I'll do something, or I'll fix something around the house, and I'll be like, yeah, big time mortified. And I'll be like, aha, I remembered, and but then there'll be times where I will do something and I will smack my knuckles on something, and I'll be like, and I can just hear him in the back, hear him in my head just going, yeah, I told you not to do it that way. It's not the way I showed you how to do it, and stuff like that. So yeah, but he was an amazing guy. He was an amazing guy. He had an amazing sense of humor. And I will tell, and it's the piece of advice that I give to everybody that loses a loved one. One of the best things that ever happened after he passed was when everybody left the church and we all went over to the house, and there was
30, 40 people passing through the house. And they all, like, most of them I didn't know. I'd never met before. But they knew I was his grandson. So they would come over and they would talk to me, and they would tell me a story. They would want to tell me a story about my grandfather. And the best thing that I ever did was listen. I listened to those stories, and I learned so much about my grandfather that day that it was a gift. So whenever I meet somebody, or whenever somebody I know loses a loved one, I always remind them, you are going to have people come up to you that you either have never seen before or have not seen in a long time, and they're going to want to tell you a story about so-and-so. And I tell them, listen to the story. You will never regret it. And you will learn things about that person that you never knew before. And it's going to make that difficult day that much more of a gift than anything else. The wisest thing, and I know I'm getting off into the weeds here, but one of the wisest things that I ever heard was that grief is just love with no place to go. Yeah, pretty cool. Anyway, before I get too far, I want to say thank you again. I know I posted a video about it, and I talked about it on Sunday, but thank you guys. And I talked about it earlier tonight, but thank you for helping me get to 10,000. Because it's not just me. You know, what I do here isn't just about me. It is about all of us that come in here and sit for a couple of hours and listen to a story. I get to tell you guys stories. It's a privilege. And it's a privilege that you all afford me. And I cannot thank you enough for that. Because it is one of the most beautiful things that I have gotten in the last year. You know, being laid off and being out of work all this time, this has made it that much easier. And it has made me understand that there is more to what my life could be than just a guy who answers phones on an IT help desk. And Rita, you're right. You know, I think one of the things that I do here is help people who've lost the sense of what stories can be. They get that back. They get to sit and listen to me talk, and their imagination fires up. And I think with as insane as the world is right now, we kind of need it. You know, I don't care, anybody that comes in here, I don't care what your politics are. I have mine, and if you look at my videos, you'll know what they are. But in this space, right here, we're all in this together. And as far as I'm concerned, we're all equal. And that's really what I want to get out of this. Do I want to expand this into something bigger? Yes. But I don't ever want to lose this community thing that we've got going on here. You know, a couple weeks ago, somebody came in and they commented, "What is a grown man doing reading a children's book?" And I thought I didn't know about it at the time, but apparently y'all dogpiled on her, but you did it in such a kind way that I thought it was hilarious.
Oh, crazy mama. I wish you the absolute best. And please come back here, keep coming back and keep letting us know how you're doing. Because like I said, this is community. This isn't just about me reading stories. It's about us connecting. And I love that. I love that. I've got ideas for this. I want to take this on the road. I want to go. My daughter. I love that. That's beautiful. I am so glad that I can do that for you. And however I do it. Like so, my youngest daughter lives in Liverpool in the UK with her mom and her stepdad. And I would love to go pack up and go visit her and be able to do a live from Liverpool, reading a story by an author from Liverpool, or at least from England, for God's sake. You know, that would be so cool. I'd love to travel around and do local stories, and like people do podcasts and they do them live. I would love to do that. Like come to a city and have a bunch of people like come to like a small like 100 people in a venue and read short stories and do it in front of a live audience. That would be so freaking cool. My ex-wife is educational designer, instructional designer. Yeah, but I am unattached, and that's okay. Oh no, I'm not a rock star. Never be a rock star. I want to sit in like a small theater. It's like I have this idea in my head of like a small like 100-seat theater. And you guys are gonna hear this. I'll probably scare all of you out of the room, but or bore all of you out of the room. But I want to do this like a small theater in some city somewhere, and where a bunch of you come in and you watch it live. But I also stream it because that's very important to me. I never want to not have this stuff available. Um, but I have this where it's just me and I sit in a chair and you know what I really want? Do you guys remember those Christmas decorations where it was like a cardboard fireplace that you had to put together and there was like a fake cardboard fire insert into it? I want that. I want a chair but that with that behind me. I think that would be hilarious. So and I read stories and then do a Q&A afterwards or just sit down and chat. I would love that. I would love that. Sir Daddy Conan. That's awesome. Yes, fireside except beside a fake cardboard fire. I think that would be hilarious. I could just bring that with me and just like store it in my car and I just bring it with me from place to place until it falls apart. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. But so it is 11 o'clock and my voice is starting to wear out a little bit. So I'm going to call it. And I'm going to say this. Thank you all for spending a little bit of time here with me this evening. Join me on Friday for another night of storytelling. And this Sunday, we begin Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which I think everybody's going to love. That's going to be a 2 Sunday event. A story of wonder and imagination in a world like none other. So if you enjoy these stories and would like to help support what I do here, please consider subscribing. It's $2.99 a month, and it helps keep the campfire lit. And you can join a growing little pod of people who I love. So until then, always at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you follow me, I put out a promo video every day that I go live. I put it out in the morning, so you'll know. And but until next time, please be kind to each other. And be kind to yourself. Because kindness matters. And so do you. Good night, everybody.